Hello and welcome to the AIM webinar series. Today's session is on combating counterfeits, a dive into anti-counterfeiting technologies and solutions. First, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. AIM is the Industry Association for Automatic Identification and Data Capture Technologies. AIM serves as a hub for quality resources covering all types of barcode, RFID, and mobile computing information. We also foster new auto ID innovations that stimulate market growth. We encourage you to get involved. If you would like additional information, reach out to us at info@aimglobal.org. It is the policy of AIM to conduct its operations in strict compliance with the antitrust laws. No AIM activities shall create even the appearance of a violation of the letter or spirit of the antitrust laws. A few other housekeeping notes. All participants are muted upon entering the webinar, but we still want you to participate. To send a question, select the Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Also, a recording of the webinar will be available in the coming days to those that have registered. And now I'd like to introduce you to our moderator for this session, John Worthland, who is with Tip of the Spear Consulting. Thanks for joining us today, John.
Hey, thanks, Bethany. I appreciate it. I'm excited about the panel discussion and appreciate AIM's sponsorship. So thank you. So today I'm joined by Rick Warther from Vanguard ID Systems and Debbie Greenway from FIG Electronics, and we're excited to do this panel. As you guys know, we did a similar panel discussion at RFID Journal Live earlier this year in Las Vegas. So we're excited to bring it to a virtual audience, kind of a roadshow, if you will. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We're going to talk about, like Bethany said, some really interesting use cases around counterfeiting and how automatic data capture, especially RFID, is being used in some really creative ways. So wanted to go ahead and introduce myself. I'm John Worthland with Tip of the Spear Consulting. I do a lot of consulting with customers along automatic data capture and RFID amongst different verticals. And I'll go ahead and turn it over to Rick to introduce himself. Then Rick, we'll go to Debbie, and then we'll get started.
Hi, my name is Rick Warther. I'm president and founder of Vanguard ID Systems in Downingtown, Pennsylvania. We are a manufacturer working with systems integrators and value-added resellers for RFID form factors and products, 200 different form factors, and shop floor data acquisition, warehouse distribution, transportation, logistics, healthcare, and pharma.
Thanks for joining, Rick.
Thanks.
And Debbie.
Hello, everyone. I'm Debbie Greenway. I'm with FIG Electronics. FIG is a German manufacturer and designer of RFID readers and antennas, and I'm responsible for the U.S. operations of that company, based just outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Great. So Debbie, I'm gonna start with you. So, obviously people know what counterfeiting is, right? And we've all heard of different use cases. when I was in Las Vegas, you always think about buying the Rolex watch for $20, right? We all know that's probably not the real thing, but talk about kind of the scale of counterfeiting. Is this really a big deal? And what are you seeing as far as how this impacts the economy and what what the ripple effects are, if you will?
Yeah, sure. It's a little hard to identify the scale. The counterfeiters are stealthy by nature and don't report their numbers very often, if at all. So I went with the data from the U.S. Patent Office. They estimate that counterfeiting globally has an impact of somewhere between $2 and $4.5 trillion a year to our economy. So that's more than the GDP of most countries. And counterfeiting is considered the largest criminal enterprise that we have. So it's a big deal. And it's not just, the revenue loss for people. It's almost like identity theft for your brand. We all work really hard to create a reputation and trust with our customer base, and counterfeiting can wipe that out really, really quickly. There are also safety concerns in the food industry, for example. If you have an allergy and you end up getting a counterfeit product that contains items that you're allergic to. Obviously, in pharma and healthcare, if the products don't meet the standards, there can be huge safety, even loss of life concerns. along with the economy, I mean, if people are losing somewhere between $2 and $4.5 trillion a year, then they're going to it's going to affect the job market, and people are going to lose their jobs, and people who don't have jobs don't pay taxes, and so it's just a vicious cycle of a downward spiral, really. Also, you know, we all work really hard to create sustainable products, and counterfeit products are known to use cheaper raw materials that increases waste and pollution and many other things. So it's not just a loss of revenue, which is massive. There are a lot of negative impacts to counterfeiting.
Yeah, I agree. Some of the use cases that I've been involved with before I was with Tip of the Spear Consulting, I was with Zebra Technologies, and we were really looking at, and I'm going to talk about the pharma. You mentioned that before. I think that really hits home to everybody. We did a lot of research. There's FDA regulations coming out, not only in the food industry but the pharma industry, to help mitigate some of the financial and personal medical impacts that are happening with bad food, bad medicine, things like that. I actually did a panel a couple weeks or a couple months ago, and one of the folks was with me was from a leading hospital, and the statistic he gave me I thought was very sobering. He said 1 out of 8 prescriptions contain some kind of counterfeit product into it, or some kind of counterfeit ingredient. And that not only could be something that people don't feel, don't experience.
Yeah.
It could be something that causes maybe a little stomach ache, a rash, something that's a little bit irritating. But some of them are, depending on allergies and things like that, that could mean that a family's planning a funeral where they didn't expect that. So it's really very, very serious. And I applaud the FDA and the government for getting in. Usually, I'm not a big fan of big government, but I'm seeing where industries are getting together and trying to figure out how to make these things safer. We all hear about the lettuce outbreaks and things like that not only affect restaurants, but they affect your fast food restaurants and everything else. So we're seeing a lot of look at not only barcoding but also RFID, because the industry requirements are so strict that you have to now serialize every little item, to know that you got that item and that item's in the shipment, and there's a chain of custody. And trying to do that with line of sight technology, has its limitations, right? There's a lot of errors that happen in there. So we're seeing a lot of interest in RFID for the automatic data capture. On a little bit more brighter side, not so gloomy, we're also seeing, I was telling, we were talking earlier with Debbie and Rick, and I live here about an hour outside of Detroit, and I just recently got season tickets to the Detroit Tigers baseball game. I enjoy going there, and one of the booths, sells a lot of autographed memorabilia, bases, balls, all these different type of things. And unless you're buying those, I mean, some of those collectors pay thousands and thousands of dollars, and you're taking the word of the person that's selling it to you. It could be on eBay, it could be something reputable, like being at a Tigers game. But we're seeing that RFID is starting to get put into the jerseys, the balls, cleats, things like that, for a lot of different sporting events, where you can put a reader as that, near where the player is going onto the field. So you actually know this garment or this item was in this particular game, worn by a certain player. And so now you have some actual real data that you're able to capture to do authenticity. So it's been really interesting. I'll head it back over to you, Debbie. I know you're seeing things like in medical devices and other sort of industries. Maybe you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, we're seeing RFID being used to combat this counterfeiting in a lot of markets. I work with a company that makes some high-end ski apparel, for example, and they're embedding RFID tags. And it's quite easy because these are big, bulky items. You can put an RFID
Sure.
tag in there quite easily to make sure that when it gets to the retail stores, it is authentic. These are expensive items, and people want to get what they're paying for. Our biggest market right now, as you said, though, is in medical devices, where there are disposable products being used. They're highly counterfeited, and in all the markets. I mean, people try all kinds of ingenious ways to combat it, from mechanical connections to watermarks, to barcodes, as you said, secure. The counterfeiters are brilliant, and staying one step ahead of them is a challenge. But RFID has been proven over the years to, so far be able to innovate with encryption on the tag side and make sure that it's harder and harder and harder, near impossible to replicate the tags. And our readers, of course, we work closely with the tag makers to make sure we can follow along with their encryption and read those tags. So yeah, medical devices is our biggest market at the moment, where we are helping our medical device customers keep their disposable business, because that's, kind of like printers and razor blades, that's where the continuing revenue comes from.
Absolutely. Yeah. I started my career as an Air Force medic, hospital medic, back in the late 80s. And, if I would have known now what I knew then, back in the 80s, you didn't have any type of technology, or really, I don't think, very much awareness of counterfeiting. So it's been very eye-opening as well.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Debbie. So Rick, one thing we want to talk about within this was what this does to consumer trust and brand integrity. I know you had some thoughts about that, so I'll kind of turn it over to hear your thoughts on that angle.
Well, unfortunately, it's not good when it happens. The quality concerns are there, the poor durability, functionality are all then compromised, and the trust in the brand then really erodes the relationship, and the safety risks associated with safety standards, and it damages the consumer trust in the brand's reputation. When you get into negative brand association, it's like falling out of love with your product that you had this great relationship with, and it can negatively impact the brand's reputation, and it becomes a spiraling downward trend, because less revenue, less money changes the ability for the brand to do certain things. That loss of revenue diverts sales away from genuine products. It diverts sales, money away from the ability to do research and development and innovation and new products that can come out. And as a result, in today's world, new products and growth and new innovative solutions are everything to a brand. And no one likes the old product that just doesn't live up to the new expectations of a new product that could deliver a better, a smarter, faster solution, right? And so overall, counterfeit products erode the consumer trust and brand integrity, and undermines the brand's credibility and reputation with value proposition that it has with the customer, and it erodes that long-term relationship with the customer that you want. So
absolutely, kind of getting back to, my wife and I, we got our season tickets right for the Tigers. So about a weekend ago, we kind of went hog wild and getting all our Tigers gear and stuff. And you can notice that the stuff that was, kind of more high end had the MLB, officially licensed with a hologram and all these different things on it. So you knew that it was authentic, and it was very interesting. But, you have that, you have, we talked about earlier with medical, I mean, being so big, but, brand is huge. And there's so many choices for customers to make. I mean, I still get mad when my fast food person doesn't, they forget to take the pickle off, a couple times that I'm going from one place, I'm going to go to another place, that makes me mad, and I go back to the other. So, it's very interesting how fickle that comes, and how, people are very much creatures of habit, and they expect to get, what they're paying for. So again, one of the things that I'm seeing in the industry is, I mentioned earlier, is that the FDA mandates, and Debbie, you hit on it earlier. A couple of things that are really hitting right now are the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA 204, which is looking at food traceability. So we're looking at a few, key items such as lettuce, shellfish. There's several things on what we call a food traceability list. And what we're looking to do is basically serialize those products. So we know where it was grown. We know the lot number. We know the serial number, and it's traced from where it's taken out of the ocean, or where it's taken, something's taken out of the land, and it's traced all the way through to the consumer, whether that be at a grocery store, at a restaurant, fast food, anything. So what we're finding is that collecting that information is very difficult, because a lot of these customers along the value chain may be using pencil and paper, for that type of collection, and they're looking to see, how do I make this better? And they're thinking, okay, the next thing is I'll probably look at is barcoding, right? But when they see the mass amount of data and how frequent, the RFID is starting to be a more logical jump, even going from a paper-based system to more advanced data capture like that, because they need to collect that data, and it's got to be right. Because what we're finding on the other side of the table with the FDA is in the pharma, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, which has been been working on this for about almost 11 years now. We're same sort of traceability, but it's almost at a higher level. So if I'm a wholesaler and I'm sending a bunch of products to, let's say, Walmart or Walgreens, pharmacy, I have to detail out all the serial numbers there and all the pallets and all the cases and bins that go from point A to point B. And if that person doesn't have that information, that data that goes along with the shipment, legally, they can't even take that in. And so not only is that very much needed, but it's really the data capture and the encoding part of that becomes so critical to go along with it, so that you have that traceability. And again, that's where we're seeing RFID come into play, because there's a lot of scanning, and it's you can't put, if you have a pallet of 100 different cases, I can't just say scan that one item and say there's 100 of them. I have to scan each individual serial number, and people always say, well, just throw bodies at it, right? And I think COVID has told us that, we don't have bodies to throw at us, at the problem, and it doesn't help to have two people trying to scan those boxes, because then it becomes even more complicated. So we're seeing that automatic data capture really, take effect. So the mandates that are happening, I think, are not saying that you have to use RFID, but I think what's happening is that along those value chains, companies are starting to wake up to see that, hey, we're going to try it, the cheaper way, right? Because companies are resistant to change and resistant to, to investment, but they're finding that the reality is they need more, more of a sensor-based approach to the data capture than a worker-based transaction. Okay. So kind of along those lines, if I wanted to go from point A to point B, Rick, talk to me about some of the challenges that you've seen as far as implementing this sort of technology.
Well, I think the first thing is always cost. First question that always comes up when you're looking to do integration is cost. And what are the costs of the tags and the readers? Tags are more expensive than barcoding, but it's really come down significantly, which has amazed all of us in the industry, that it's now finally gotten down to, comparable to barcoding, and of course the additional tools and resources that it gives you, it's well justifiable. The different software technologies that exist through acquisition can be a challenge. You might have 2 or 3 different platforms across the entire enterprise. And now you're looking to do integration with RFID. It may very well be a significant challenge in trying to get it to be scalable. And, scalability is one of the big hurdles you have to deal with. If you're all one platform and one format, and that's easy, much easier, obviously, but many times you see a number of different platforms that they're working with. And during the integration process, you find risks associated with data security, because there are holes during the development process. There are holes in maybe a port or two, which could be targets for hackers. And so it's just an additional exposure that you get when you've got people that are writing code, trying to integrate a system into an existing system. So it's just not a huge thing, but it can be. And can be very big if somebody gets in there and starts messing around, right? I find that one of the other big hurdles that I've seen over the years is the resistance to change. Because it's a new technology, resistance from employees are used to the traditional method of tracking products and dealing with it can be a real challenge. And the first time I ever did integration many years ago, we installed barcoding system for inventory control in a retail environment, and took weeks to set it up. I did all the training. A couple of weeks later, I come back and it's all messed up. And it was actually sabotaged. And I pulled the manager aside and said, "What's going on here?" And he said, "You don't understand. The employees are afraid this is going to take their job away." And that's a common problem in integration. We've seen that before, but you get that at different levels as well. You get somebody that doesn't want to learn the new system, and so resistance to change is always going to be there, no matter what you're trying to change in anything new. But it's certainly going to be an ongoing challenge, no matter what you're changing, right? And then you get compatibility, frequencies, protocols, standards. Challenging to ensure capabilities is a challenge on the technical side. And sometimes it's no big deal, and you're plug and play, and away you go. And sometimes it's not, and it all depends on it's on a per occurrence basis, what you're trying to get done and what you're trying to accomplish. But other than that, those are some of the typical hurdles that I see in integration and guys that are putting things together.
Yeah, and I echo all those things that you're saying too, Rick. I talk to my customers, and like you said, if you're talking to a director above, they've been doing the same thing for 24, 25, 30 years, right? And the resistance to change in a professional environment is certainly a risk, right? And with all the things that are happening with some of the mandates, that I always remind people that the Walmart mandates and things we're seeing in retail that are much further ahead. And I ask people, I say, well, Walmart, would you agree that it's the largest retailer on the face of the earth, but they're also very frugal, and smart. And if they see value in putting an RFID tag on packages of underwear, then maybe maybe things have gotten to a point where they're stable, and obviously the prices come into a better reality where it makes more sense. So Debbie, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would just say I agree with all of those things, and I think as RFID experts, it's up to us to help our customers through these things, and those are all great points. Sometimes I talk to customers and they want to stick with their barcodes, and because they have they have everything they need, and I tell them, you have a reader, you have a tag, and you have some software. That's all you need for RFID, and it's more secure, and you can read hundreds or thousands of tags at once, and you can write to them. So you can log that product's journey on the tag. You don't have to keep all that information, and however you're keeping it. It's a lot simpler, and you see their eyes open, and to the points that you made, John. This is something that a lot of people are using. It's not new, and it's not unproven. So I think, with a little conversation, it's easy to kind of melt that resistance to change a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, I think this has been a good discussion. Hey, Bethany, I'm going to go to you. Do we have any, I know we're getting close to the end of our time. Do we have some questions that we can address?
So yeah, we will be taking questions from the audience today. Again, if you haven't already, you can submit your questions via the Q&A application at the bottom of the screen. We will start with the first question. How big a problem is having RFID tags enter a system that do not use standardized data formats?
Or Rick, you want to take that one with your implementation?
Yeah, I think it's just a lookup table, essentially. And that's the most layman terms I can go with. But you know, if it's unique data, there is a identifier, you know, either a TID or your own UID that you can write to the memory of the RFID inlay. And that relates then to maybe the product code, UPC, whatever it may be. And it's just a lookup table that is associated with it. You can time and date stamp that transaction. I mean, Debbie really probably understands this better than I do. She does a ton of that, you know, through her reader.
Yeah, yeah, and our great software partners, but it's really quite simple. I mean, if you just take a step back, no matter what method you're using, you're tracking your product in some way. And so it's not any different. It might be a new system for you if you desire, you know, a better system, but basically we're grabbing data, our readers are grabbing data and sending it to the cloud or to wherever you need it. There are lots of middlewares and full-on softwares that can be utilized to make it as easy or, you know, as internal as you like it, or as, you know, as standardized as you like it. There's a million options.
Absolutely. All right, Bethany, I just kind of pulled up the questions. Where do you want to go next?
So the next question we have is, can you elaborate on blockchain's tie-in?
Maybe or Rick?
Well,
Yeah,
we have some customers using blockchain. It just kind of is more of a preference. Personally, we, you know, here at FIG, we don't say this is necessary to have an RFID anti-counterfeiting system. It is a way to do it for sure, and people who like blockchain are using it, but it's not necessary. We also have a payment division where we make payment terminals, so we know a lot about credit card processing and banking, and even that industry is not using blockchain right now anyway. And so it's not necessary to combat counterfeiting, but can be done. I think some people think it's simple, just depends on the frame of mind you have about it.
yeah, and I would say it's sort of like square peg, round hole. Blockchain's great for validating data and cross-validating the information is authentic. But in reality, when you're dealing with this technology, it's really data acquisition, and blockchain chain can certainly validate the data that you're getting, so that there's maybe no corruption or hacking or something like that. But that's really more on the data side than the data acquisition side and authentication side, because this really, our proposition today is really on authentication more than data validation. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
And then one other question we have is, what are the greatest challenges and sources of resistance to the use of RFID within the pharma industry?
Yeah, I can probably take that one. So, you know, working with the pharmacy for a couple of years in this area, I think the biggest resistance was that the FDA mandated a move from a 1D barcode to a 2D barcode. So the pharma industry had to respond with changing packaging, which was a very costly and very, you know, labor-intensive solution. So that really was where the mandate started. And RFID really wasn't, I don't think, mature or really in focus or looked at when it started, you know, in 2013. And right now, everybody's trying to still get to compliance. Right now, we're in a 1-year stabilization period in order for all the different players along the supply chain, you know, to get on board and make sure that they can transmit data back and forth from supplier to manufacturer and manufacturer to customer. So I think the industry now is aware of that. I think once everything stabilizes, I can see there was been a lot of interest in looking at RFID, but it's kind of, you know, we got to finish what we started. Hopefully that makes sense.
And another question we have is, have you experience of supporting the end user patient using RFID specifically with prescriptions?
I have not seen that at all. Really, where we're seeing RFID is in the supply chain. It's getting products from the supplier into the backdoor Walgreens, if you will, right? Not necessarily at the drive-through window. We're still seeing that as being barcoding, at point of sale, if you will. And also there's a lot of pamphlets and things that are being encoded, 2D barcodes for consumers to find out more information about their medication, but really not seeing anything for use within RFID for the consumer, like with a consumer phone or anything like that.
All right, and then one other question we have here is, do you have any idea how items like counterfeit or falsely documented airplane parts go into major airline fleets? And how do we stop this?
Rick or Debbie,
I-
any thoughts on that?
I'm not sure. I don't have any idea how those products get in the supply chain, but I mean, there's no industry that isn't subject to counterfeiting. Every single industry from spacecraft to bubblegum has reports, being counterfeited. And the one thing I do know is that the use of e-commerce has made it a lot easier for counterfeiters to get their products into the supply chain. I personally am unaware of how airlines purchase products and how it happens, but there are very professional companies that I know in the medical world that approach, hospitals and such and say, we can supply you with these products at a discounted rate. They're high quality and they're good at what they do. So I imagine that's probably how it happens with the airlines as well. These are, anytime there's something super expensive, it's prime target for counterfeiters. And RFID, as we've been saying, is a great way to combat that. There are tags that can be embedded into most products and can't be removed very easily at all. So that's a way to counterfeit it or to combat it for sure.
It's a
Right.
very
And I'll go
interesting.
one. Go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
Sorry. It's a very interesting question. As a pilot, a private pilot, and also worked with the airline industry through the association. I think there's a lot more getting into general aviation, but general aviation reaches many times at the higher end and higher sophistication aircraft into commercial. And so, you can go on eBay right now and buy general aviation airplane parts, and they're made, by obviously nefarious people, that if they're counterfeit, and so it can easily move up the supply chain ladder from general aviation to commercial, especially if it's large private aircraft, right? And whether it be engine parts or foot pedals for the rudders. And so that, I think, is how it's leaking in. But I think Debbie's comment is a really good one, and that is there's ways to track that from the manufacturer that is the legitimate manufacturer of that aircraft, for somebody like Boeing, for instance. We've been involved in tracking assets for Boeing here in the South Philadelphia plant, which does a lot of work in the U.S. government. But so they're very aware and interested in tracking assets, and they have their own unique challenges because you can't just necessarily embed RFID into titanium. And a lot of what they're doing is really very specialized metals, although there's a whole lot more movement into epoxy-based materials, which you can then embed. But how it gets in, boy, that's a very interesting question. And I think it probably happens much more internationally than it does in the US and Europe. I think it's happening in places that are far off in the third world nations, and then the airplane gets flown and all over the world, So it's a very interesting question, and it's a very interesting challenge. And I think, there are products that certainly can address that. And that just really takes some digging and research and on the specific products you're talking about, because each product's got different requirements and demands, and it acts differently with metal versus obviously plastics and so forth. So that's a big one.
Yeah. Okay. Bethany, how are we doing on time?
So I think this should conclude the end of our Q&A session. Thank you to all the participants who submitted questions. I want to thank all of our panelists for their insights and knowledge and for providing us with this session today. If you'd like to learn more about the topics discussed in today's session, you can reach out to our panelists through the information listed on the screen.
Yeah, Debbie and Rick, thanks again for a great discussion. Bethany and
Thank you,
Aim,
John.
thanks so much for facilitating.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
All right,
Thanks,
until next time,
everyone.
thanks
Take care.
everybody.